All right, welcome to the show. My name is Will Steele. I'm the Free to Lead podcast, Journeys of Leaders Driven by Passion, Inspired by Purpose host. And today I have an award winner, an Emmy Award winner, and repeat Oprah Winfrey guest, founder of Fearless Living Institute. It's an organization dedicated to giving people the tools to master their emotional fears. She's the author of 4 best-selling books, including Fearless Living. She's been on 3 seasons of daytime drama series in America, and starting over, it's called, sorry, and is named America's favorite life coach, globally recognized as an expert on fear and fearlessness. She's appeared on The Early Show, The O'Reilly Factor, and Montel Williams Show, and been in magazines like Shape, Marie Claire, First for Women, as well as newspapers and radio shows across the world. And she believes in sharing her experience and a fearless philosophy. She does workshops, online classes, interactive website. She's clearly on a mission, driven by purpose and driven by passion and inspired by purpose. So without further ado, here we have Rhonda Britten. Rhonda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
Great.
I love Will, lead. Let's just lead somewhere. Let's just do it.
Yeah. Great. I'd love to have you share your journey. What got you to being on Oprah Winfrey? What got you to be heading up your own organization and being a leader of that? It's a great story, but I'll leave it to you to.
I think you're referring to the worst day of my life, which basically so many people are afraid to discuss the worst day of their lives because they're thinking that they don't want to bring it up. They're worried about what other people think. And I know I was like that for decades and decades. And what I've really realized is the worst day of your life is actually it has the seed of your destiny, the seed of your purpose, the seed of your passion. And our work on this human plane is to become the person who can fulfill that destiny, can fulfill that purpose, can live with that passion. So what you're referring to is the worst day of my life, a day that ran my life in a negative way for over 20 years. So when I was 14 years old, I grew up in a little tiny town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow a year, 2 restaurants, that's it. It's Father's Day. My parents are in the middle of going through a divorce. So my father's coming over to take us out for Sunday brunch, which is a big deal because there's 3 girls, 2 adults, it's 5 people, that's a lot of money. But I'm pretty excited because we're going to go to the fancy Douglas House Buffet Hotel, and I can't wait to flirt with the boys my age. So I'm in my mom's bedroom, and she's fluffing up her beehive hairdo and putting on her rose-colored lipstick and her blue eyeshadow. And I hear my dad at the door in the back, and my mom goes, "Go greet your dad." So I go in the back, and my dad is coming in the back door. It's a little bit rainy out, and he's like, "Where's your sisters? Let's go," because that's what dads do. And my sisters I have 2 sisters, one older, one younger, and they're both in the bathroom. We have one bathroom, about 650 square foot, 750 square foot house. And we have one bathroom. So they're fighting it out in the bathroom. And me and my mother start walking towards the door. And my dad, because it's raining now, says, "I got to go get my coat from the car." Now, this coat is a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat. My mom's putting on her plethora raincoat herself. Me and my mom are at the door. My dad goes out before us, yells one more time, "Come on, girls, let's go." As my father walks out, my mom and myself behind him, he goes to his trunk to grab his Naugahyde leisure suit coat. And I notice as he's opening the trunk and puts his hand in to grab the coat, that he has not grabbed a coat, but he has grabbed a gun. And he starts screaming at my mother, "You made me do this. You made me do this." And he fires. And I'm screaming, "Dad, what are you doing? Dad, stop. What are you doing?" And he cocks the gun and he points it at me. And I absolutely believe I'm next. And he blinks, I blink, he blinks, I blink. And then my mother, who already has 1 bullet that has been lodged in her abdomen, looks up and sees my father with that gun in my face, and literally with her last words screams, "No, don't." And my father, realizing my mother's still alive, cocked that gun again and shot my mother a second time. This time the bullet went through my mother's abdomen, out her back, and landed in the car horn. And for the next 20 minutes, all I heard was, "Eh." And then my father cocked the gun one more time, put the gun to his head and fired. Now I am 14 years old, and in a matter of 2 minutes, I witnessed my father murdering my mother and committing suicide in front of me. Now, I don't know how most people would respond to that, but this is how I responded. I blamed myself. It's my fault. I did nothing heroic, right? I didn't grab the gun. I didn't even jump in front of my mother. I didn't kick my father's shins. I did nothing heroic. And now my mother is dead, and as well as my father. And I did nothing to stop it except no, stop, don't. And so for the next 20 years, I blamed myself. And you don't get to be happy when you watch your mother die and you did nothing. You don't get to be happy. So happiness was off the table. And for the next 20 years, I found ways. I lived two lives. On the outside, I was a straight A student. I got a scholarship to college. So, fine on the outside. But in the inside, I was in self-destruct, right? I had no confidence, no self-esteem. I blamed myself. I had horrible nightmares every night that my father was killing me. And so over the next 20 years, I tried to kill myself 3 times. I had 3 DUIs. I became an alcoholic, got 3 DUIs. And it was my third suicide attempt that I realized something. I realized I'm not very good at killing myself. I'm not going to kill myself, and I got to figure this out. So during those 20 years, it's not that I was just self-destructing, drinking, committing suicide, etc. I was always also trying to do everything I could to heal myself, right? I went to therapy, I went to child workshops, I did shaman work, I did oil, you name it, I did it. And so that third suicide attempt, when I did realize that I didn't know how to kill myself, I had tried so many things and nothing seemed to work. And I remember them releasing me from the psychiatric ward, because if you try to kill yourself 3 times, they are going to put you in psychiatric ward for evaluation. And I was in the psychiatric for evaluation. And when they released me and deemed me not crazy, I remember going back to my little studio apartment and leaning against the wall and just in dismay about how could I change my life? How could I do this? I've tried so many things and I've tried to numb myself so many times and nothing was changing my life. And I remember so vividly leaning against the wall and I slide down the wall. And I said to myself, I have to start over. I have to start over. I just have to start over. And what do they do in kindergarten? I literally asked myself, what do they do in kindergarten? And I remembered that we had a calendar and gold stars. And so I went to the store, got a calendar with gold stars. And for the next 30 days, put a gold star next to anything that I did. And put a gold star up on a calendar anytime I did anything good. And I mean anything good. And I'm not talking brilliant things. I'm talking about got angry and didn't break anything. Okay. Had 1 drink, not 3. Like I'm talking about very beginner behaviors. And at the end of 30 days, I realized I had so many gold stars that I realized there was some hope for me and that I was worth saving. And that was the beginning of me, even though I'd done all this work, that was the moment when I really took my life back. And at the same time, in that same year, it was the 20th anniversary of my parents' death. And I also went through the deep work of forgiving my father for murdering my mother, forgiving my mother for that moment. It wasn't her fault, obviously, and she didn't do anything per se. She didn't cause it, but just taking her off the pedestal of this innocent victim and bringing her back to human reality and be like, she's a human being and she engaged in this and kept us there, and et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, I forgave myself, which was the hardest of all. And through that act of forgiveness and through those gold stars and through crawling through the glass and doing little bit by little bit and creating my own exercises to help myself, I eventually found my way out of the darkness and into the light. And eventually, years later, became a coach. And let me tell you, that was not easy because I was working as a PR person at the time, and I had a client who was one of the very first coaches in the world. And he would tell me, you're going to be a better coach than me. And I'd be like, no, you don't remember. My father killed my mother and killed himself. I was an alcoholic. I got 3 DUIs. I was in jail for a little while. Nobody's going to want to work with me. And I really believed that. I really believed that my past dictated my future. And it was only after I uncoupled those two things, even though I'd heard it millions of times before, your past is not your future. Yeah, but inside it just felt so real and so true. And any time that I tried to break free of that, it just like I couldn't do it. And it was only when I uncoupled that my past is not who I am. The past does not dictate my future, that I started to embrace the path of where I am now.
Mm.
Hesitantly, nervously, but I eventually did do it.
Yes. How did you actually how did you reconcile that past and everything you'd made it mean?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one of the key factors was forgiving myself. I think really key was forgiveness. And most of us, many of us, I should say, either like I denied I had to forgive my parents. I thought I forgave them the day they died. I was like, I'm fine. I went in complete denial.
Mm.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I forgave my father. I forgive everybody. Right. So I was in denial because I couldn't feel the pain or the heartache or the loneliness or the shame
Mm.
of my past. And it was the willingness to feel my feelings and to embrace them that and move through them, because that's the key too. Not wallowing in them, but really use them for growth and transformation, really use them as the fodder for our seeds of transformation. That I was able to finally move into a place where I could honestly and authentically forgive my father, forgive my mother, and forgive myself. But I had to feel it first. Because for 20 years, if you would have said, "Oh, you got to forgive," I'd be like, "I forgave them." And the fact, the funny thing is that I'm a fear expert, and I would have told you those 20 years I wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. So I think that's the thing. It's that willingness to see your humanity and to embrace your humanity that really sets you free from the constraints on one hand of humanity, right?
Yeah.
It takes you beyond what you think you're capable of.
Yeah. And what would you say to someone who's stuck with one of their parents or and they just well, I just can't forgive them.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
I created
how
an
do you know
I
that
did
they
it. I
can't actually forgive them? What they did is unforgivable. But
Oh,
because I
yeah.
did that a lot myself, and I worked through. I'm just
Yeah.
interested to see how you approach that. Or if
Well, I
people listening to the show, they might be like, "Well, I can't forgive my father, or I can't forgive my mother. I'm not going to."
or forgive a teacher or forgive an organization or forgive yourself, right? So it's not just forgiving our parents, it's forgiving all the times we felt betrayed, all the times we felt abandoned, all the times we felt rejected, all the times people didn't do right by us. And by the time we're in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, we've got plenty of things to forgive. And if we don't clean up along the way, then it just builds on one another. So when I was going through the deepest, darkest part of my journey in those 20 years, I actually created an exercise for myself. And that's one of my superpowers. One of my superpowers, what I did in 600 episodes of reality television, is I created a unique exercise to help each woman or each man what they were going through, create an exercise, a visceral exercise to really transform their relationship with what they think their problem is. And so I created an exercise for myself, and I will share it. If you'd like me to share it, I'll share it now. It's a really quick little forgiveness exercise. And so if whoever's listening, if you this relates to you or you want to know this exercise, maybe for a friend or for a child, is go ahead and grab a piece of paper, put a line down the middle. So you have two columns. And in the left-hand column, I want you to say, write the person's name or the organization or the incident that you cannot forgive. Okay. Because you might not even remember the person's name that you have this unforgiveness towards, right?
Yeah.
So in the left-hand column, you're just going to, on the top, you're just going to write the name, organization, et cetera. You're going to do this one by one. So you can't put a whole bunch of people. It's just one thing at a time. On the right-hand side, I want you to write the following phrase: I'm willing to forgive you. Now, this is how we do it. The challenge with the brain is we have these lovely neural pathways. And the neural pathways and how our brain is wired is when we have a problem in the present, it automatically looks in the past for a solution, right? It looks like a filing box. It goes through all your problems and what solution can I use? What solution can I use? What solution can I use? And it's that saving energy. It's the way we're wired. And so the we automatically go into the past to find a solution to the present problem, thinking we're going to create a new future. You can see the challenge with that, right? So we go into the past, and that's where we get stuck, right? Because then the past relives itself over and over again. So we need to create new neural pathways, because the neural pathways we have are going to keep us in that same go to the past, go to the past, go to the past. And
Yeah.
for me, going to the past was, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I didn't save my mother. I'm not good. So I had to shift that conversation, and I had to create new neural pathways. So this exercise that we're about to do is actually going to create new neural pathways, because one of the challenges of creating new neural pathways is we either get stuck in the past or we stay imagining the future, but it's not anchored to any reality in our lives. So this is going to tie those together. And what we're going to do is we're going to, let's use my dad for an easy example, because we already talked about him. So in the left-hand column, I'm going to write dad on the top. And I am going to write a phrase, a word, a sentence, just one. Dad, how could you do this? Yeah, just write that. Then I'm going to go over to the right-hand column and write, I'm willing to forgive you. Now my body and brain are going to be, screw you, Dad. I am not forgiving you. Go back to the right side. And I might add the words, I'm willing to forgive you one day in the far future. And then I go back to the left-hand side, right? So we're actually dealing with the emotional life on the left side and our past. And on the right-hand side, we are creating a neural pathway to help us move forward with our intention, which is to forgive, release, let go, surrender, right? So we're going to live in these two worlds together, because that's mastery, is when you can live in the paradox. And that's when you can break free from the past. And so we're living in this paradox. Dad, how dare you? And I'm willing to forgive you. No, I'm not. Okay, maybe one day I'm willing, and then willing to maybe one day in the future. You did this, and screw you, I'm willing to forgive you. So we're going to keep on allowing our feelings, allowing all the pain or the hurt or the frustration or the anger, whatever it is, one sentence at a time, one phrase at a time, one word at a time, and then go over to the right and set our intention. You know what? Even though you did that, even though that happened, I am somewhere inside of me, I'm willing to forgive you. And I really encourage my clients to do that exercise, repeat it over and over again until you're emotionally exhausted. And you might have to do this exercise 3 times, 5 times, 6 times, depending on the entrenchment of that in your neural cells. But what I do know to be true is I've had clients do this for the last 20, almost 30 years now, and it works, because it creates new neural pathways, and those neural pathways create opportunities, and they create a new opening for you to see your life through a different lens. And that's the power of creating neural pathways. But we must be proactive to do that, and we must be consistent, and we must say yes to it.
Great, 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 great. Good. Thanks for embellishing that. And how's that freeing you from all of that? It's quite apt given the name of the show, right? Free to lead. How has that propelled your leadership? Because you've clearly gone forth in life and made a name for yourself and impacted thousands of people and been on TV and all of that stuff. So just how did that release you?
I'm going to give you a quick example of a quick client story in answering this question. I was teaching a workshop, and this man, multimillionaire, and I was at a 7-8 figure group, and one of the people brave enough to answer raised his hand and said, I make millions of dollars and I lose it all. And I make millions of dollars and I lose it all. And I make millions of dollars and lose it all. And I asked him, I said, who haven't you forgiven? And he was like, what? Because he wanted a strategy, right? He wanted a tool. He wanted me to say, tweak your marketing. He wanted me to say, come up with a new log line. But really, when I asked him this question, he told us a quick story at this event about how his grandfather and his father did this. Same thing. Made a lot of money, lost it all. Made a lot of money, lost it all. I said, yes. And you must be willing to break the family pattern, because right now you're entrenched in loyalty, as you were probably raised, and as we all should be, because it's about survival. So your little being inside is surviving and needs to stay connected to your father and grandfather. And in order to love them, in order to respect them, in order to stay connected to them, you've got to repeat their pattern. So you can't blame them, shame them, make them wrong or bad. And he's literally looking at me like, what, are you crazy? And I said, yeah, the reason you keep repeating the patterns that have been handed down for your mother and father, your father and your grandfather, is because you haven't let it go. You haven't forgiven them. You haven't been able to see their humanity. and how that happened and why that happened and what they were really afraid of. You haven't seen them for who they really are, and therefore you haven't seen yourself. And therefore you haven't been able to be honest with yourself. So when you, and again, I'm not saying forgiveness is a tool is the only tool in the toolbox in order to make millions of dollars. I'm just saying that when you're holding a pattern from the past, part of that is owning and claiming that pattern, that whether it was handed down to you through your DNA, by the way, that's been proven now that fears are handed down through our DNA. So you don't even have to remember them. That's another thing that happens with my clients is they're all like, I just have to find out why I'm like this. I just have to find out why I'm like this. I'm like, there is no why. There is no one why. There's no why. There's no one why. There's hundreds and thousands of little things that happened to you in your lifetime, built on one after another, and your parents and your grandparents and your teachers and your caretakers and your extended family and your DNA,
Yeah.
right? So quit looking for the one thing and face where you are now and admit that where you are and be willing to see yourself as a human being who is yearning and has desires, and as you said before, purpose and when you want your purpose and you want to live passionately, then you must pull off all constraints to that. And in order to pull off all constraints to that, you must free your energy field. And in order to free your energy field, you must be okay with feelings running through you. You must be okay with feeling, and you must be okay with moving those feelings through you and deciding what to do with that energy field that those feelings contain. So forgiveness is part and parcel of that, but it's only one tool in the toolbox. So when I started I do today, which by the way took a while to embrace, because who was I to do it? Remember that whole terrible past. Who was I to tell people what to give them advice, guidance, coach them? How could I do that? And when I started being a coach 30 years ago, there was like 5 of us. There was no coaching. There was no industry called coaching. So it was also a new field. So it was also scary and vulnerable. But what I did is I quit worrying about myself, right? I quit worrying about my fears and insecurities. And I got really good at listening to what was moving through another. And then I would move past my own fears, apprehensions, worries, and be in service to that other human being and
Yes.
help them become who they were meant to be. And then when I help them become who they're meant to be, it helps me become who I'm meant to be. And then I help them and they help me. It's a partnership.
Yeah. Symbiotic.
It's totally symbiotic. And it's a great privilege and honor. And it doesn't mean that I don't doubt my leadership sometimes. It doesn't mean I don't have doubts sometimes. I'm a human being.
Yes.
Doesn't mean I don't think, what am I doing? Sure, I have all those things.
Yeah.
But what I know is that fear is an illusion, even though it feels real.
Mm.
And I also know that fear is part and parcel of how we're made from that neurobiology,
Yeah.
and that we're not meant to get rid of fear, or fear can never go away. It's about mastering it and becoming friends with your fear. Once you do that, once you understand how fear works within you, then the game changes. And that's really what I did. I created the only tool that really helps people, a mental model of how people understand how fear works and how to transcend fear.
Great. There's so many different ways to come at the same thing. It's interesting because
It
I'm
is
listening
there.
to the way I do it with my clients, and I'm listening to yours. It's really interesting, and it's you got to find your own path, which I think is
That's
so
right.
great. And then, where
That's
do you
right.
see yourself in 5 years from now? You've already accomplished so much, Sarah.
I'm doing a couple things. One is I'm writing my memoir right now. 339 pages, the first draft. And so I'm in the process of in final edits for that book, for my memoir about my dark night of the soul. That's one. And then two, I have been coaching for 30 years. I have been training coaches since the year 2001. And I am the only coaching program in the world that has mentorship, supervision. We listen to tapes, we listen to you work with clients, you work with clients throughout the whole program. And so I've developed a lot of tools to help coaches, leaders, therapists become more masterful in their relationship with their clients or their team. And I have just finished, I've literally, it's like on this, it's literally in getting, it's all designed, it's all ready, creating a sales page, doing everything in order to start spreading the word. So I've created a fearless living coaching toolkit that you can use 40 of my tools and concepts with your clients. I show you how to use them. And more importantly, I give you the questions your client might be saying which tool to use when. So I am basically, for the first time, sharing 40 of my tools and concepts with coaches, therapists, and giving them the worksheets to give to their clients to support them in order to master some of these skills. So I'm creating some cheat sheets for coaches, and I'm in the middle of creating a tool certification for those. And I'm also in the middle of finishing up my skills certification. So I'm also the only coaching program in the world that actually teaches 8 coaching skills. Most coaching programs teach tools, right? They teach, ask this question, have them read this book, do this, but they don't actually teach the skills of coaching. That's a lost art. And I have created this skill based practice through my coaching, my own coaching, as well as training my coaches. And I'm creating a skill certification too, because for the last 20 years, I've only taught this to my own coaches. And I realize that there are tens of thousands of leaders, coaches, therapists, wellness practitioners that have clients that could use the tools that I created. So those two things are in the works. They're going to be launching in the next 3 to 6 months. So I'm super excited to be spreading the word about all the tools and skills that I've created for my coaches that they use with their clients that now anyone can use.
Great. We'll be putting it in the comments, but how should people contact you if they want to contact you, reach out to you?
fearlessliving.org. And I'd love to give a free little gift for folks. It's Stretch, Risk, or Die. It's a course, Stretch, Risk, or Die. It's a 45-minute course, 3 50-minute videos. And basically, it cures procrastination. So if you're having trouble taking risks, if you're stuck in procrastination, I promise you, you are going to be able to squash it with this tool. It's my clients' one of their favorite tools. And I give you worksheets and all the different things, all the examples, so you know how to use it. There's even a little conversation at the end of these 3 videos about me talking about the Wheel of Fear and Wheel of Freedom, which is my fear work. So go to fearlessliving.org, fearlessliving.org/risk, R-I-S-K. So fearlessliving.org/risk, R-I-S-K. Put your name, your email, grab the course. You'll get access to the course. Of course, you can unsubscribe to my email list after that if you'd like. But just know that these coaching, therapy, leader tools are coming in the next few months, and I'm super excited.
Great. Wonderful. Great to have you on the show. And thank you for sharing openly about your story and how that freed you and how you freed yourself to be free to lead and create everything you're creating. So really, thanks, Rhonda.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me. Be fearless.
Yeah.